that are saying, thus saith the word of the Lord. And it's lining up with scriptures, not going against scripture. I would say to try the prophets, test the spirits, try the spirits, same thing, to see if it's of God. You better pray to God in these last days, end times, for discernment. And you better study, thus saith the word of the Lord. So you won't be beguiled by the serpent's sake. And you can say and beat him over the head with a club, or it is written down. Because you know the word. The word is written on your heart. God put me through a cult right after I had my death and hell experience and came back scared to death and joined a cult that was out. Some along the lines of the Jehovah's Witness that was out to get as many scalps for Jesus as we could. A legalist bunch. Yeah, Brother Jack, I know. Somebody find that arguable. But you live and learn. And it was a cult. But I'm going to tell you, God is in all things to work is good. My discernment started to kick in late. And I threw myself into memorizing as much as the Word of God, because we were like Pharisees with the phylacteries, scriptural verses that they carried in leather pouches around their forehead. We were like them. So I would remember double and triple what everybody else remember and use that word against them. Let them answer them, showing them we're wrong what we're doing. We're wrong until I found the left of that cult, because I had enough of the word in me to know that they were wrong. It's a pharisaical bunch. That's why it's hard to get me now with the Jamesite type crowd. I've been there and done that. Everything was a sin, including breathing. Can't get me with that. You got to come a new route. I've been in the opposite. Get my teaching. The pendulum swings from legalist to lawlessness. Say he can't turn you into a Pharisee, legalist. He'll turn you into lawless freak. If he turn you into a legalist freak, he'll turn you into a lawless freak. A crawling, do as thou wilt. And that includes the church work. The Bible said, do everything decent and in order. You've got some churches I've been in, total services. Spirit wasn't subject to the prophet. And I seen some buffoonery that you would think I was making it up, you just wouldn't believe it. As they hid under the skirts of Jesus with this clown show that I done seen. Totally out of order. Spiritual show off, and it's the thing that Paul wrote to Corinthians. He had to write 4 letters. They were called plutocrats in the spirit, spiritual show off. He said, I speak in tongues more than y'all, obviously. And Paul had to tell him that he wasn't showing up. His glossolalia gift. Like I said, the pendulum swing one way or the other. You got the ones that don't believe in the glossolalia and don't believe in and the prophets, Bible prophecy. Those churches have just become nothing but morgues, nothing but mausoleums with a slight pulse. And you have these Jesuit-trained theologians coming out of these Bible seminary schools, getting a mortician license to embalm the congregation of the dead. God didn't want me to go to the Bible cemetery schools. I tried. I thought that was the way to go. Nope. God put so many obstacles in my path, I couldn't do it. He took me to the backside of the mountain to get trained, make sure I was autodidactic, could trace. You can always trace what they teach you. God didn't want a record left, what I was taught. God, when he teaches you very well. You can look at the characters in the Bible. Elijah and Elijah would have been the dean of the school of the prophets back in that day. They never attended no Bible school. They didn't attend school, but they was automatically. They just said, hey, I want to retire and go teach. They could have done it. That's God's training, backside of the mountain. That's for any of the prophets. Daniel. Well, Daniel actually went to the school of the Majid. He was formally trained as well as Moses. Moses was trained in all the arts and sciences of Egypt. Now, when God had something to do, he didn't use the ignorant. When God had to get his church straightened out, the ignorant fishermen couldn't do it. God had to raise up Paul, who was a philosopher. He had a PhD, trained at the foot of the land. Gamaliel, Gamaliel. I'm not against. What I'm against is indoctrination, and that's what we have in these colleges and universities today. We don't have education. We have indoctrination. That's what I'm against. If it was true education, they teach you to critically think for yourself, I'm all for it. Them days have been long though. You got college professors that couldn't pass an 8th grade 1912 bullets elementary school exam. This is elementary. We talking college professors. They couldn't pass it. That's how far off the education they got from education to indoctrination. Marxist education, we could be very specific. Marxist indoctrination. It's what you get in these university colleges, including Bible school. Now, I know that was my intro. I've just been heated at the gun grabbing that's going on this week. And I said, like I said, it's time to let my people go. It's time to let my people go. It's time to let my people go. And the shaking is coming to Washington, D.C. You watch. God has had enough. Spirit will not always strive with me. All right. This is what we're teaching from the King James original, 1611. It had the 19 apocryphal books in it for over 200 years. This nation only been in existence 200 and, 50, 60 years. That's a long time. And it was taken out. And we're teaching on it. We're going back because these modern Bibles, these Jesuit modern Bibles, done took hell out and everything else. Done even attacked the divinity of Christ in these modern Bibles. Some even attacked the gender of God. trying to make him a female. That's how far off these Bibles have gotten. So we're going backwards. We're going to the original. Now I'm reading from the book of Jasher. I know I'm cheating because I like the big letters. I'm supposed to be reading the Bible, I showed you. It's the same book. Now, we left off at chapter, I'm going to turn my brain around, 65. LXV, 65, Roman numeral. LXV. LXV, 65. That's where we left off. Now, like I said, Moses has been firmly established. Because when you were growing up in my era, the Bible was like a good fairy tale book, a fable book. But God led me early on into the sciences of the Bible, including biblical archaeology. Very disciplined science. And especially when I came across decades ago Ron Wyatt, that solidified my faith. You have no idea. Because for years I was told to shut up, brother, stop asking questions, and just believe. Take your brain out your head. That's what happens in most churches anyway. You don't need a brain to go to most churches. They misquote and butcher the wisdom of men. That's taken out of context. Context is with text. God gave you a brain for a reason, especially if you use it. Including the study of his word, his book. Just shut up, brother, and believe. That's what I was told. When I ask a lot of questions, those asinine preachers couldn't answer. The Bible said to study, to show yourself approved. I have a ready answer for any man, any question. Preachers and ministers of God's word should be the most autodidactic people on earth, most learned people on earth. They used to be that way. Used to be, the preachers were not only a man's man, they had respect of men. In other words, he was one of the toughest guys in the town, best shooters, and we can go on and on. Until cowardice took over the church in the New Age, which produced a bunch of spineless celebrities. They could get no respect in any arena in the world, much less one that's so-called dominated by alpha males. You got these beta preachers. Men of God, even in the founding of this nation, inspired fear when they came to town or someone's house. They had utmost respect. Like I said, they were the toughest guys in the town. They were men's men. They had heart, like David. David was a man's man. I love David. One of my favorite characters in the Old Testament. Moses, David. I mean, you didn't mess with these guys. We're going on. Been all the prophets. It was tough guys. Pretty much in the Bible. Elijah. You don't want to mess with Elijah. He called fire down on you. Burn you up. He was the fire prophet. Moses a drought. He was the water prophet. Men's men. That's why I love this book. It's a war book. I've been saying it for years. And it came to pass. All right. Enough of that. Let me get into the word. And it came to pass after these things that all the counselors of the Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and all the elders of Egypt assembled and came before the king and bowed down to the ground. And they sat before him. And the counselors and elders of Egypt spoke unto the king, saying, Behold, the people of the children of Israel is greater and mightier than we are. Thou knowest all the evil which they did to us in the road when we returned from the battle. And thou hast also seen their strong power, for this power is unto them from their fathers. But a few men stood up against a people of numerous as the sand, and smote them with the edge of the sword. Excuse me. And of themselves not one is fought. They killed thousands of men, and not one of them died. 150. We read that earlier. That's been following the series. So that if they had been numerous, they would have then utterly destroyed them. And therefore, give us counsel what to do with them, until we gradually destroy them from among us, lest they become too numerous for us in the land. For if the children of Israel should increase in the land, they will become an obstacle to us. And if any war should happen to take place, they with their great strength will join our enemy against us and fight against us and destroy us from the land and go away from it. So the king answered the elders of Egypt and said unto them, This is the plain advice against Israel, from which we will not depart. Behold, in the land are Pithom and Ramses, cities fortified against battle. It behooves you and us to build them and to fortify them. Now therefore go you also and act cunningly toward them, and proclaim a voice in Egypt and in Goshen at the command of the king, saying, All ye men of Egypt, Goshen, Pathros, and all ye inhabitants, the king has commanded us to build Pithom and Ramses, and to fortify them for battle. Who among you, of all Egypt, of the children of Israel, and of all the inhabitants of the cities, are willing to build with us, shall each have his wages given to him daily at the king's order. You're tricking them into slavery. That's how tyranny happens. A chicken in the pot for everyone. Slaves. Each have his wages given him daily at the king's orders. So go ye first and do cunningly, and gather yourselves, and come to Pithom and Ramses to build. And while you are building, cause a proclamation of this kind to be made throughout Egypt every day at the command of the king. And when some of the children of Israel shall come to build with you, you shall give them their wages daily for a few days. And after they shall have built with you for their daily hire, draw yourselves away from them daily, one by one in secret. And then you shall rise up and become their taskmasters and officers, and you shall lead them afterward to build without wages. It's how tyranny begins. You volunteer to give up your rights. And when you volunteer to give up your guns, you become a slave. Nothing stopping. Afterward to build without wages. And should they refuse, then force them with all your might to build. Study the history of the world. Everyone that gave up their rights to their fathers. Was it the Bolshevik Revolution? of 1910. They went to the gulags shortly after, giving up their right to defend themselves with honor. 20 million from Lenin to Stalin, Russian citizens were killed. Germany, 1938. Gun legislation passed. The Jews and citizens of Germany gave up their rights to firearms. 11 million killed and destroyed. Communist China under Chairman Mao. 1960s. Strong gun legislation passed. 65 million slaughtered shortly after. Tyranny, slavery, gulags, concentration camps, death camps is the result of citizens not armed, not able to defend themselves. They're nothing but unarmed sheep for the slaughter. Tyranny is at the doorstep. As soon as they tell you to disarm yourself, all you got to do is just study a little bit to understand that. Now, see how they were tricked into slavery? Kept giving up their rights, gave them a little chicken change. They sold out for the chicken change. Gave them a little stimulus here, a little stimulus there. Next thing they were enslaved. And they became their taskmaster. That's government. That's the Egyptian government enslaving the Hebrew citizens of Egypt. And you shall lead them afterward to build without wages. And should they refuse, then force them with all your might to build. And if you do not do this, it will be well with us to strengthen our hand, or strengthen our land against the children of Israel, for an account of the fatigue of building and the work the children of Israel will decrease, because you will deprive them from their wives day by day. And all the elders of Egypt heard the counsel of the king, and the counsel seemed good in their eyes, and in the eyes of the servants of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of Egypt. And they did according to the word of the king. This is how they entered into slavery, into bondage. And all, they became bureaucrats, went to work for the government with slave wages. And then pretty soon they was working for free. And all the servants went away from the king, and they caused a proclamation to be made in all Egypt, and in Pontus, and in Goshen, and in all the cities which surround Egypt, saying, you have seen what the children of Esau and Ishmael did to us, who came to war against us and wished to destroy us. Now therefore the king commanded us to fortify the land, to build the cities of Pithom and Ramses, and to fortify them for battle, if they should again come against us. Whosoever you from all Egypt and from the children of Israel will come to build with us, he shall have his daily wages given by the king. To his command is unto us. And when Egypt and all the children of Israel heard all that the servants of Pharaoh had spoken, there came from the Egyptians and the children of Israel to build with the servants of Pharaoh, Pithom and Ramses. But none of the children of Levi came with the brethren to build. That's the priestly tribe. That's the ministers of the tribe. They didn't go to work for the government of Egypt. They didn't receive wages from the government of Egypt. They didn't get a non-profit 501c3 to keep their mouths shut as new agents of female pastors for the government. And the coexist bunch taking their orders from the pedal pope over in Rome. They didn't join Pharaoh in this crew. And all the servants of Pharaoh and his princes came at first with deceit to build with all Israel as daily hired laborers, and they gave to Israel their daily hire at the beginning. And the servants of Pharaoh built with all Israel, and were employed in the work with Israel for a month. And at the end of the month, all the servants of Pharaoh began to withdraw secretly from the people of Israel daily. And Israel went on with the work at the time. But they then received their daily wage hire, because none of the men of Egypt were yet carrying on the work with Israel at that time. Therefore the Egyptians gave Israel their hire in those days, in order that the Egyptians and their fellow workmen might also take pay for their labor. And at the end of the year, in 4 months, all the Egyptians have withdrawn from the children of Israel, and so that the children of Israel were left alone, engaged in the work. They backed out. They left them slaves. And after all the Egyptians had withdrawn from the children of Israel, they returned and became oppressors and officers over them. And some of them stood over the children of Israel as taskmasters, to receive from them all they gave for them the pay of their labor. And Egyptians did in this manner to the children of Israel day by day, in order to afflict the Israelites in their work. And all the children of Israel were alone engaged in labor. And the Egyptians refrained from giving any pay to the children of Israel from that time forward. Now you see how they became slaves in Egypt. God told Abraham 400 years earlier, they would go down as free people and they would become slaves. Now you see how that happened. Because of Joseph, they were free. And when some of the men of Israel refused to work on account of the wages not being given to them, then the exactors and servants of Pharaoh oppressed them and smote them with heavy blows, and made them return by force to labor with their brethren. And thus did the Egyptians unto the children of Israel all the days. And all the children of Israel were greatly afraid of the Egyptians in this manner. And all the children of Israel returned and worked alone without pay. And the children of Israel built Python and Ramses. And all the children of Israel did the work, some making bricks, and some building. And the children of Israel built and fortified all the land of Egypt and its walls. And the children of Israel were engaged in work for many years, until the time came when the Lord remembered them and brought them out of Egypt. And the children of Levi were not employed in the work with their brethren of Israel from the beginning until the day of their going forth from Egypt. So Levi didn't get caught up. Those men of God stayed clear of the slavery of Egypt. For all the children of Levi knew that the Egyptians had spoken all these words with deceit to the Israelites. Therefore the children of Levi refrained from approaching to the work with the brethren. And the Egyptians did not direct their attention to make the children of Levi to work afterwards, since they had not been with the brethren at the beginning. Therefore the Egyptians left them alone. So God's priestly order was left alone. The Levites, those ministers, they seen the trap that the Egyptians were setting. Their brothers didn't see. Those men of God did not sell out for chicken change to work for the government of Egypt. And the hands of the men of Egypt were directed with continued severity from the children of Israel in the work. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel work with rigor. And the Egyptians embittered their lives of the children of Israel with hard work, mortar and bricks, and all the manner of work in the field. So the only free people were the men of God and women of God of Levi. And all the rest was slaves. Now we're supposed to be free in Christ. We aren't the slaves of the world, flesh, and the devil. We've been set free in Christ. Where the Spirit of God is, there is liberty. And the children of Israel called Maloi, the king of Egypt, Mirror, the king of Egypt, because in his days the Egyptians had embittered, means bitter, because in his days the Egyptians had embittered their lives with all manner of work. And all the work wherein the Egyptians made the children of Israel labor, they exacted with rigor in order to afflict the children of Israel. But the more they afflicted them, the more they increased and grew. And the Egyptians were grieved because of the